Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
General Hospital spoilers allude that Port Charles's next dead body may have just been revealed. Will Jen Sidwell make another fatal move that sends shockwaves? In GH's November 4th occasion, Britt Westbourne ratted Professor Henry Hank Dalton out for being a snake. Sidwell got updates on Dalton proposing a deal that involved cutting Sidwell out and participating the gains with Britt once they took their work to someone differently. Although Sidwell sounded amused over the disclosure, that's presumably because he's formerly fed up with Dalton's lack of progress and knows this Joe is enough important useless. Britt was promoted because of Dalton's incompetency, so that's important to keep in mind. Sidwell ordered Britt to accept Dalton's offer and serve as his asset, so he obviously wants to see what Dalton will do next. Britt is supposed to find out if Dalton was just blowing bank or if there's a buyer who's expressed interest. Of course, Sidwell is someone who tolerates unskillful serpents. It's tough to imagine Dalton will survive veritably long if this kind of jest keeps up. In fact, Dalton's treason may have formally guaranteed that he's a goner. After all, Sidwell has proven how far he's willing to go when someone's a problem. Judge Eva Heron set up herself floating in the water thanks to Sidwell, so Dalton may be coming in line for an analogous fate. It shook Rocco Falconeri and Danny Morgan up when they set up Judge Heron deceased that night. Now that Rocco's getting tangled up in all this Dalton drama, he might indeed be the one to find the professor dead at some point. Emma Scorpio Drake may point the cutlet at Britt if Dalton's body is discovered and leave Rocco averring there must be another explanation. Rocco collided with Sidwell after his failed attempt to score Britt's crucial fob, so it clearly seems like he's poised to become a bigger player in this plot and land in some peril. Anyhow, General Hospital spoilers say Sidwell could order another fatal outgrowth soon, so stay tuned to see whether bad news is brewing for Dalton. The morning sun, a great golden coin freshly minted in the sky, cast a warm, forgiving light over the tranquil expanse of the lake. The water was a sheet of polished glass, perfectly reflecting the deep cerulean of the heavens and the deep green of the surrounding pines. It was a day that felt scrubbed clean, a blank slate, a promise whispered on a gentle breeze. To anyone standing on the pebbled shore, it was a day for beginnings. For Jason Morgan, standing knee-deep in the shockingly cold water, his slacks rolled up to his calves, it was a day he had dreamed of for months. Cradled in his strong, capable arms more accustomed to the cold steel of a wrench or the harsh grip of a weapon, was his infant son. The baby, swaddled in a delicate white linen gown embroidered with a tiny cross, gurgled contentedly, his innocent blue eyes wide, reflecting the vast sky above. He was oblivious to the significance of the moment, to the weight of the vows about to be spoken over him. Standing opposite Jason was his brother, the Reverend Damien Spinelli. Damien's hands, usually flying across a keyboard or gesturing wildly as he spoke in a rapid-fire stream of tech jargon and pop culture references, were now still and reverent. He held a simple, polished wooden bowl filled with water from the lake. His face, often alight with a kind of manic energy, was serene, etched with a profound solemnity that transformed him. "We are gathered here today," Damien's voice, clear and steady, carried across the still water and the hushed crowd of family and friends on the shore, in the sight of God and this community, to welcome this child into the fold of faith. To mark him as Christ's own forever. Jason's gaze was locked on his son's face. Every fear, every past failure, every shadow that had ever crossed his own life seemed to melt away in the radiant purity of that tiny countenance. This was his chance. A chance to break cycles. A chance to build a legacy not of violence and vengeance, but of love and protection. The baby's mother, Elizabeth, stood just a few feet away, her hands clasped under her chin, tears of unadulterated joy tracing silent paths down her cheeks. Her smile was a beacon, grounding him, reminding him of the goodness he had somehow managed to find and hold on to. "Jason," Damien said, his voice softening as he addressed his brother directly. "Do you, in the presence of God and this congregation, promise to raise this child in the Christian faith and life?" Jason's voice, usually a low, gravelly rumble, was thick with emotion, but it did not waver. "I do." The two words were a vow, a fortress, a prayer. They were the most important words he had ever spoken. Damien dipped his hand into the bowl. The water dripped from his fingers, catching the sunlight like scattered diamonds. Then I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. As he spoke, he traced the sign of the cross on the baby's damp forehead. The infant, startled by the sensation, let out a small, indignant squeak before settling back into the safety of his father's arms. A collective, soft sigh of joy rippled through the onlookers. It was done. The covenant was sealed. Encouraging words began to float from the shore, gentle and warm. "Welcome, little man. What a beautiful moment. He's perfect, Jason. Just perfect." Elizabeth waded into the water to join them, wrapping an arm around Jason's waist and leaning her head against his shoulder. They were a portrait of a family, whole and sanctified. For a single, suspended moment in time, everything was right in Jason Morgan's world. The ghosts of Port Charles, the mob wars, the betrayals, the losses, were held at bay by the sacredness of the water and the promise in his arms. Damien, beaming now, the formal reverend giving way to the proud uncle, clapped Jason on the back. "The cyber-encrypted gates of heaven have been successfully breached, brother. The mini Stone Cold is officially a citizen of the kingdom." His quirky metaphor broke the remaining tension, and a genuine, happy laugh escaped Jason. It was a rare sound, one that made Elizabeth's heart soar. This was the pinnacle. This was the moment he would cling to in the days and weeks that followed, a burning ember of light in the overwhelming darkness that was to come. The celebration that followed was held at Elizabeth's art studio, a space usually filled with the scents of turpentine and fresh paint, now transformed by the aroma of warm food, champagne, and the sweet, powdery smell of a baby. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating the vibrant colors of her canvases, which seemed to celebrate the joy of the day. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings. The mood was buoyant, effervescent. Jason, having changed into dry clothes, moved through the crowd with his son still in his arms, seemingly reluctant to let him go. He accepted handshakes and hugs, his usual guarded demeanor softened by the occasion. His closest friend, Carly, enveloped him in a fierce hug, her voice a low, earnest whisper in his ear. "You deserve this, Jason." "All of it," she said, her eyes glistening. "After everything, look at you. You're a fantastic father. This is your fresh start. Don't let anyone or anything tarnish this." Her words were a balm. They were the encouragement he needed, reinforcing the fortress he was building around this new life. Sonny, standing nearby with a glass of whiskey, nodded in his gruff, understanding way. "The past is the past. Today is for the future." These were the pillars of his support system, their words fortifying the walls of his newfound peace. But even in the brightest light, shadows lurk. Across the room, standing somewhat apart from the merriment, was Cyrus Renaud. His presence was a dark stain on the pristine canvas of the day, a necessary but unwelcome political gesture in the complex ecosystem of Port Charles power dynamics. He was a man of the cloth, yet his divinity was a thin veneer over a core of pure menace. He offered Jason a slow, calculated smile that never reached his cold eyes. A touching ceremony, Cyrus's voice was like oil on water, smooth and suffocating. A new soul brought into the light. It's a powerful thing, a father's love. It makes a man vulnerable. It clarifies his priorities, wouldn't you say? The words were draped in the language of the ceremony, but their intent was a naked threat. "I see what you love. I know where to strike." Jason's jaw tightened. The warmth of the moment evaporated from around them, replaced by an arctic chill. He didn't respond, merely met Cyrus's gaze with the unyielding stone of his own. The message was sent and received. The angry threat, hissed under the cover of celebratory noise, was a serpent in their garden. The party continued, but a fracture had appeared in Jason's perfect day. He held his son a little tighter. It was as the festivities were winding down, the champagne flutes emptying and the goodbyes beginning, that his phone, which had been silenced for the ceremony, vibrated with an insistent, urgent rhythm. He glanced at the screen. It was the police commissioner, Max Scorpio. A call from Mac on a Sunday, especially this Sunday, could not be good. Excusing himself, he stepped into the small back office, the sounds of the party muffled by the closed door. "Mac," he answered, his voice already shifting back into its operational cadence. "Jason." Mac's voice was grim, stripped of all pleasantry. "I'm sorry to do this today of all days, but I need you to come down to the old waterfront warehouses. Pier 7. Jason's stomach coiled into a cold, hard knot. "Why?" "We found a body, Jason." Mac hesitated, a pause heavy with dread. You need to come down here. You need to see this for yourself." The words "a body" were a common enough occurrence in his world, but the tone in Mac's voice was different. It wasn't the detached professionalism of a cop reporting a crime. It was laced with a personal, aching pity that terrified Jason more than any direct threat from Cyrus ever could. "Who is it?" Jason demanded, his voice a low growl. "Just get down here, Jason. Now." The line went dead. The world outside the office door, the laughter, the music, the gentle cooing over his son, seemed to recede into a distant, muffled hum. The fortress of his fresh start was under assault, its walls trembling. He emerged from the office, his face a carefully constructed mask of neutrality, but Elizabeth saw it immediately. She knew every micro-expression, every flicker of tension in his shoulders. "What is it?" she asked, her voice low with anxiety, her hand finding his arm. "I have to go." "Police business," he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. He couldn't tell her. He couldn't speak the dread into existence. He kissed her forehead, then his son's, the gesture feeling like a final, desperate prayer. "I'll be back as soon as I can." Carly caught his eye from across the room, her expression questioning. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Don't ask." "Not here." The encouraging words of just an hour ago now felt like a cruel joke. The angry threat from Cyrus now felt like a prophecy. The drive to the waterfront was a blur. The beautiful day now seemed garish, the sunlight an intrusive glare on a world that had just become infinitely darker. Jason's mind raced, cataloging possibilities, running through a list of names, allies, enemies, associates. Who was missing? Who would Mac insist he identify personally? Pier 7 was a skeleton of rotting wood and rusted metal, a relic of the city's industrial past. The air, so clean and fresh at the lake, was thick here with the smells of salt, decay, and diesel fuel. Police cruisers were parked at haphazard angles, their red and blue lights painting the grim scene in pulsating, morbid strokes. Crime scene technicians, looking like ghostly figures in their white coveralls, moved with a slow, deliberate purpose. Mac Scorpio stood at the yellow tape line, his face etched with a deep weariness. He lifted the tape for Jason to duck under. "Where is he?" Jason asked, his voice hollow. "In the warehouse." It's not good, Jason. The body's been in the water for a while." Mac put a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of restraint and comfort. "Prepare yourself." The interior of the warehouse was a cathedral of shadows, the few beams of sunlight cutting through the broken roof and dusty windows illuminating swirling motes of dust. The air was cold and heavy with the unmistakable, sweetly foul odor of death. In the center of the vast, empty space, under a hanging work lamp, was a shape on a body bag laid out on a gurney. The medical examiner, a woman named Lisa, gave Jason a sympathetic nod. "Cause of death appears to be a single gunshot wound to the chest. But the exposure, the marine life, it's made identification difficult." Jason's heart was a frantic drum against his ribs. He forced his feet to move forward, each step an eternity. His mind, his entire being, was screaming at him to turn back, to return to the light, to the baptism, to his son. But he was compelled forward by a terrible, gravitational pull. He focused on the details, a coping mechanism born of a lifetime of violence. The shoes. Waterlogged leather, a specific, rugged brand. The jeans, dark denim, now stained and torn. A belt buckle, tarnished but familiar in its simple, heavy design. And then, on the left hand, barely recognizable, was a ring. A heavy, silver ring with a distinctive, almost Celtic knot design. He knew that ring. He had seen it every day for years. He had bought one just like it, a symbol of their unbreakable bond, their brotherhood. The world tilted on its axis. The air was sucked from his lungs. A high-pitched whine started in his ears, drowning out the murmur of the police and the hum of the generator. No, the word was a whisper, a plea, torn from the deepest part of his soul. It can't be. He stumbled the last few steps, his eyes desperately scanning for more confirmation, begging to be wrong. He saw the build of the body, the broad shoulders, even in their current state. He saw a patch of hair, matted and dark, but the right color, the right texture. Lisa, sensing his recognition, gently, reverently, pulled back the top of the body bag from the face. Time stopped. The face was waxy, bloated, and marred by the ravages of the water and its inhabitants. It was a horror, a nightmare vision. But it was undeniably, irrevocably, him. It was his brother. Not Damien, the brother of his soul and his newfound faith. This was his brother by blood. The brother he had fought with, fought for, and lost. The brother he had spent years searching for, hoping against hope that he was alive, hiding, building a new life somewhere. It was Drew. The foundation upon which Jason had built his entire life, the foundation of being the survivor, the protector, the one who carried the burdens so others didn't have to, shattered into a million pieces. The encouraging words from the baptism, "You deserve this, this is your fresh start," curdled in his memory, becoming taunts from a universe that had never intended to let him have peace. The image of his son's peaceful, baptized face was instantly replaced by this grotesque, lifeless mask. The sacred water of the lake became the filthy, corrosive water of the pier. The vow he had made, "I do," felt like a lie, a promise he was now powerless to keep, because he had failed in his most fundamental vow, to protect his family. A sound ripped from Jason's throat, a raw, animalistic cry of agony that seemed to tear the very fabric of the warehouse's silence. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated grief, a howl of loss so profound it shook the officers around him. He collapsed to his knees on the cold, dirty concrete, his great shoulders heaving. Tears, the first real, unrestrained tears he had shed in a decade, erupted from him. They were not silent or stoic. They were a torrent, a floodgate of a lifetime of suppressed pain, guilt, and rage bursting forth. He wept for the brother he had lost. He wept for the years of not knowing. He wept for the hope that had just been brutally extinguished. He wept for his son, whose baptism day would forever be intertwined with this horrific discovery. He wept for the fresh start that had ended before it had even truly begun. Max Scorpio could only stand by, his head bowed, allowing the man this private, public devastation. There were no words of encouragement that could penetrate this darkness. No comfort to be offered. When the storm of his grief finally subsided into ragged, shuddering breaths, a new emotion began to crystallize in the void it left behind. A cold, sharp, and infinitely more dangerous emotion. Rage. He slowly climbed to his feet, wiping his face with the back of his sleeve, his tears replaced by a terrifying stillness. His blue eyes, so full of love and hope just hours before, were now chips of Arctic ice, burning with a cold fire. He looked at Drew's body, at the evidence of a violent end, and he made a new vow. A vow not to God, but to the ghost of his brother. This vow was not of life, but of death. The angry threat from Cyrus Renault now had a new, terrifying context. Was this his work? A message to Jason? Or was it one of a dozen other enemies from their tangled past? It didn't matter. He would find them. He would hunt down every last person responsible for this. The man who had been baptized in the lake was gone, submerged in the polluted waters of the pier. In his place stood the enforcer, the weapon, the avenger. He turned to Mac, his voice a low, deadly calm, devoid of all the emotion that had just shattered him. Who did this? Mac could only shake his head. We don't know, Jason. We have no leads. Jason's gaze returned to his brother's body, His promise hanging in the foul air, a threat more potent than any Cyrus could muster. "I'll find them," Jason whispered, the words a death sentence. "I will find them, and I will make them pay."